When Mother's Day rolls around, every once in a while, I like to remind us of the history of the holiday. One reason is that it started with a Unitarian Universalist anti-war activist. The other reason is that it brings a very fluffy Hallmark holiday down to earth a little bit. Julia Ward Howe was the original creator of Mother's Day. It was a day for women of the world to unite in their rejection of war. A day for mothers to say, enough is enough. In 1873, women's groups from 18 different American cities observed this new Mother's Holiday. I want to share with you a few lines of Julia Ward Howe's famous speech that year. It's called the Mother's Day Proclamation. It's actually in our hymnal. She wrote about the horrors of war and a mother's perspective. She says, "Arise, all women who have hearts. Whether your baptism be that of water or of fears, say firmly, we shall not have questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking of carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm." I didn't find that in any of the Mother's Day cards that I went shopping for this year. When Mother's Day was first started, the holiday wasn't about flowers and brunch. It was a deeply sincere political movement based on the loss and sufferings of war. I love a good brunch. My friends can attest to that. And celebrating the glories of mom is a worthwhile idea. I just think it's dangerous when we turn mothers into a particular kind of saint. Also, posing mothers as the ideal fulfillment of that nurturing archetype ignores the great many other people of all genders, with and without children, who nurture our world every day. I've been reminded lately in a few different ways about how much nurturing is a virtue. Part of that is seeing how much more inclined some people are toward that way of being. I tend to be more of a problem solver than a nurturer. Don't get me wrong, I am a competent listener and I enjoy the role of pastor to Tapestry and the wider community. That piece of my ministry just doesn't come as naturally to me as it does for some people. Like any virtue, though, like persistence or generosity or courage, nurturing is something that can be cultivated when we flex that muscle and remind ourselves that it's there. Sometimes we need a reminder of our capacity, whatever it is. Virtue is a word that gets used often without really understanding what it actually means. Aristotle brought virtue ethics to the forefront of philosophy. He developed a whole ethical framework called virtue ethics that says the right thing to do is the thing that cultivates better virtues for a person or a community. The development of character is more important than a hard and fast rule written in stone. So the key question is this who I want to be in the world? Do I want to be the kind of person who responds with kindness or judgment? Do I want to be the kind of person who works hard? Do I want to be the kind of person who gives my resources to those in need? The ethical choice isn't just about what one does in a particular moment. It's about the type of character you build, because we're likely to act that way over and over again as a habit. I'm bringing all of this up because I'm thinking more and more of this idealized picture of mom. And nurturing as an ideal is a virtue that all of us might grow toward and learn. When we scratch beneath the surface, nurturing is more complicated than it sounds, right? It's more than just being nice. The job of a good parent is not to be their child's best friend and give them everything their heart desires. Nurturing is more nuanced. It involves a balance between comfort and challenge. This is where nurturing really fits as a virtue. Aristotle defined a virtue as the point between a deficiency and an excess of a trait. The point of virtue doesn't lie exactly in the middle, but something called the golden mean. It's maybe closer to one extreme than the other at different times. For example, generosity is a virtue between the extreme of miserliness and wastefulness, to the right person at the right time. Courage lies somewhere between cowardice and foolhardiness in the right situation. Similarly, nurturing rests between different extremes and depends on the time and the place and the recipient of that nurturing. It is an imperfect art with a constantly moving target. So thank you, moms and dads, parents of all gender, grandparents, aunties, uncles, coaches, teachers, guides, for taking on the task that is truly impossible to be perfect at. It takes courage to try hard at something that we will never be perfect at. Just because we can't do everything, we still do what we can. A little creativity is also a necessary tool in nurturing. It's like kissing a boo-boo to make it better. There's healing between the healing and the caring that rests somewhere between our desire to make things better and our power to actually make it different. So thinking of nurturing as a virtue, something to strengthen through practice, I want to invite us to celebrate Mother's Day in a slightly different way this year. That doesn't mean skipping out on the phone call or the flowers or the brunch or that moment to remember. But this year, I'm suggesting that we each add a little extra piece of nurturing that we do ourselves. Moms are great, but nurturing isn't their job alone. It is a job for all of us. So I ask, what's one concrete thing you can do outside of your usual routine to mark the holiday? You might call a friend you haven't spoken with in a while. That's what I intend to do. My best friend just recently moved away and graduated with another degree. We don't talk often enough, and I need to call him, so I will. Maybe you could do something for a neighbor or someone else you know, trimming a tree or offering some surprise cookies. You might volunteer to teach our kids one Sunday in the religious education class. If you're able to, you might leave a wildly generous tip for wait staff or at a coffee shop, something big enough that it gets noticed. You might sign up to bring coffee on Sunday, or do the even more generous thing of signing up to clean up coffee afterwards. So I ask, what's one concrete nurturing thing you can do to celebrate this Mother's Day? This isn't a hypothetical question. I want you to think of something specific, and I want you to turn to a person near you and tell them what you are going to do to celebrate Mother's Day. See, Mom taught me well. It's okay to twist an arm every once in a while. If you're on Zoom, you might write it in the chat. A little chaos is okay. You got a minute. Tell someone. Thank you all for playing along with my little exercise. I can't wait to hear some of your Mother's Day celebration activities. For a minute, I want to lift up how nurturing shows up as a central theme in faith traditions. We haven't touched on that yet. You don't have to be a scholar of comparative religion to know that breaking bread or sharing a bowl of rice is central to religious traditions around the world. Caring for the sick, caring for the elderly and for children, caring for orphans, educating people. These are all activities that have been left to religious community around the world to go and do. I would argue that hospitality is at the core of the Christian tradition that we inherit. The miracle stories of Jesus, if you remember, are about healing people and feeding people, most of them poor people. I'm not going to go into a deep dive of Christian history, but since it is our history, I think it's important to lift up that nurturing is there, loud and clear. These days, Unitarian Universalists tend toward more abstract beliefs. They sometimes speak about a greater power, a force in the universe, unending creativity, or the Big Bang. It's nameless, sort of faceless. Creating life and nurturing are some of the most important human elements we see in the sacred. One of the ways UUs might see that is through the lens of the creation of the universe. I've spoken about this before, but it seems worth lifting up again on Mother's Day. The Big Bang has never settled particularly well with me, not because I disbelieve science or think it's propaganda. It's just a story that doesn't sink into my heart in a way that's meaningful. It may be because the language or the images that we usually bring up are of violent explosions, of chaos and noise. Mother's Day, though, reminds me of a different option. The greatest minds of society tell us at that moment, once upon a time, all that was in the universe, all that we are and all that ever was, existed in a single unit. It was infinitely dense and infinitely hot. And then about 13.8 billion years ago, that unit began to expand and cool and come together. Only through really complex equations can physicists speculate about that bizarre moment. It's beyond our everyday comprehension. It uses the word infinite in the scientific description. That suggests that those scientists are pretty overwhelmed at explaining it. Our attempt to apply human concept to this moment is, well, fleeting. Because we seek understanding, because we want to get it in our own human terms, we came up to this word Big Bang to relate. But the events 13.8 billion years ago are really inconceivable. What occurred in the beginning was more complicated and more powerful than innumerable nuclear explosions. Equations can't explain it. We need something bigger than the word bang as a metaphor to work with. What if instead we talk about a big birth? It's not that big of a leap. In a short but powerful time frame, something deeply complex and beautiful was created. From an unimaginably small beginning, with the right circumstances, growth began to occur. And the universe began to organize itself into being. The Big Birth was a frightfully powerful time. There was darkness and intensely bright light. It's a wonder that things turned out the way they did. What a baffling combination of danger and creation, beauty and pain, and bringing order into being. A big birth. All of this drama to create a beautiful, complex, growing existence with an uncertain but hopeful future. I believe that what happened 13.8 billion years ago was more similar to a birth than a bang. We are here. All of us are here. All of this is here as the fruit of a colossal act of nurturing, not destruction. Remember, as I describe nurturing as a virtue, it's not all simple or easy. There has been challenge and competition involved, for sure. Some very ugly stuff. And yet life persisted and grew in complexity. Nurturing is a powerful force, one we might tap into, one we might learn to respect and practice more regularly. And if you don't believe that nurturing is a powerful force to be reckoned with, I will have to introduce you to my mom one day. Amen.